Let's get some instant analysis. Welcoming CBS Sports combat analyst and co-host of the award-winning Morning Combat, Brian Campbell. Start with the main event. Charles Oliveira finishes Justin Gaethje with a rear naked choke in the first round. 11 straight wins. He doesn't get to keep the belt. But what did you just watch? What did you just see?
What we always see during this incredible winning streak by Charles Oliveira, which is his willingness to throw himself into danger, get a little on him, so to speak. As you saw, he got dropped twice early against the power punching of Justin Gaethje. But when it comes to operating in the deep waters of chaos, I thought this was a fight Justin Gaethje could get ahead on because he does so well in chaotic fights. But nobody handles those choppy waters better than Charles Oliveira. With a belt, without, he's a finish machine, but even more importantly, his ability to keep a cool head under pressure within the confines of being dropped, as I mentioned, and then able to get back up and put the fight in the terms that are best for him to finish it. And that's exposing what is the weakest part of Gaethje's game on the ground, taking his back, fighting through a choke attempt that didn't work, but getting it in the second time and forcing the tap. This is one mentally tough, battle-tested individual, because after missing weight and losing the title on the scale, you had to predict some type of emotional or even physical fallout from that, not being able to make weight, all of the negative headlines against him. Yeah, what does Charlie Olives do? He goes in there in a division that's historically deep over the past 3, 4, 5 years, and continues to prove with one stoppage win over another against all the great action heroes of this 155-pound era that he's the best in the show. That's inner mental toughness. That's outer physical danger. That's Charles Oliveira.
He doesn't need no stinking belt, at least not for now. I mean, we know, right? I mean, the guy's incredible. What he's able to do, what we've been able to see from him, the run that he is on, the history that he is making. And now we spin it forward because it's like, okay, well, what's next? Because this makes him the #1 contender for the vacant, quote-unquote, lightweight championship. So what happens next for Charles Oliveira?
Backed into another title fight. Well, we did find out after he missed weight on Friday, the second time, as the UFC said, if he is victorious, he would become the #1 contender for the vacant title if he beat Gaethje. It's exactly what he did. But what's crazy is we've been counting out Charles Oliveira on so many steps of this journey, including after he missed weight 24 hours ago. What's next? Could it be a rematch against Michael Chandler, who was victorious on the same card against Tony Ferguson? And if you don't remember, fought Oliveira for the vacant title a year ago. Oliveira got dropped early against Chandler, similar to this Gaethje fight, only to rally back around later and finish him. Would that be an all-action, marketable rematch? Yes. But one name to at least focus on until we find out what really is next is Conor McGregor is looking to come back from injury that he suffered in that loss to Dustin Poirier last summer. Yes, McGregor's lost 2 in a row. No, he doesn't deserve a title shot, but business calls in this sport. That's also not out of the question. No matter who gets the next shot at the title, we do know Charles Oliveira will, and boy, is it beyond time to put not just some respect on his name. How about put all of it? Because this is a storybook career turnaround for a guy who was always a dangerous threat, but was so up and down at featherweight. And at lightweight, though, untouchable. What an incredible run. If he ends up getting the McGregor money fight, you wouldn't put the blame on Oliveira. He's deserved whatever is coming next to him.
Give me the injected into my arm vein right now GIF. Right now, McGregor, Oliveira. This is the BC injected into my veins right now. I mean, come on, right? Let's go. I'd love to see that. You know I'd be jacked up for that. I'd be pumped up for that. You mentioned Michael Chandler, also on the main card against Tony Ferguson. And your pal Luke Thomas tweeted, "No one has ever done that to Tony Ferguson ever." Knocked out Ferguson cold with a front kick 17 seconds into the second round. Your reaction was what?
That was violent. That was utter violence, exactly what Michael Chandler does. And the key for this fight was Tony Ferguson at 38. We had some fears with him coming in, 3 consecutive losses. Only this was a dialed-in Tony. This was a Tony who seemed to cut no corners in training camp, looked good in the first round against Chandler, but then walked into the type of strike that when it connects, you've seen the the highlight reel finishes, whether it's Anderson Silva against Vitor Belfort or Lyoto Machida against Randy Couture. We've seen a front kick like this a few times. It's a sneaky shot. Chandler said he didn't practice it. It just came in the moment. But for Ferguson, it's devastation and defeat 4 in a row. You have to question not only how much is left, but should he continue on fighting at this level. But for Michael Chandler, who's only 2-2 since joining the UFC, only all 4 fights have been crazy action fights. Those 2 losses, almost like moral victories. Should he get the call for a second chance at Charles Oliveira, you'd have to say it's deserved just because of how willing he is to take on big damage and big action, how willing he is to let it all go and live the life of this action superhero. Michael Chandler is as dangerous as anyone in this division, and he just may have secured another shot at that title. We'll see.
What about potential fight against Justin Gaethje? We run it back from last November, which was one of the best fights we've ever seen.
I mean, that's a great thing about UFC matchmaking in a division like this. You can't go wrong with Chandler against anybody, Gaethje against anybody, Oliveira against anyone. How about against each other? We've seen those. Dustin Poirier, also a name in and around this division who makes great fights with all these guys. You can't lose, you know, from the standpoint of who do you match who against. Also, though, for all those action heroes we're mentioning, we're not mentioning Khabib, who retired, but we should be mentioning Khabib's protege, right? And that is Islam Makhachev, unbeaten, just as deserving as the lightweight title shot as anybody else. Could he cut this line and push Chandler and even McGregor out of the way? Certainly possible. Dana White has his hands full, but you know it's a good position to be in. There's no question about it.
Yeah, the lightweight division is so deep and so talented. It is incredible what that division has been able to churn out in terms of quality fights and quality champions that we have seen over the years. All right, upset in the co-main event as Carla Esparza defeats Rose Namajunas via split decision to win the strawweight title. The fight left a lot to be desired. You scored the fight in favor of Rose. What's your reaction to what went down?
If you're Rose, it's really hard to complain here. This was one of the worst title fights in UFC history from the standpoint of a lack of action, a lack of urgency, really from both fighters. How should this have been scored? How do you score this type of passiveness from both fighters? There weren't a ton of clean shots landed. There wasn't a ton of aggression. And we are in a sport in mixed martial arts where aggression and damage are the highest criteria of how rounds are scored. So if you are Rose Namajunas, a fighter that everybody believed coming in was not only the best 115-pound fighter in the world, arguably the best of all time, she takes this loss, but she took the chance of letting the judges decide in a bout that lacked a serious amount of aggression or action, who did the better work. It's tough to say no one deserves to win this fight, but the way the scoring set up, you're not just going to go 10-10 every round for 5 rounds. It was a forgettable night for Rose, but if we're looking for a little connection in history, she did defeat former champion Zhang Weili last time out in a rematch, but it was also one of those fights that was maybe closer than it should have been because it didn't look like Rose had done enough. She's a great chess player, but it's hard to convince those 3 judges sitting cage side which chess moves are better if there isn't a ton of action at the end of it. Let's give Esparza credit for turning her own career around, just like Rose, the first ever strawweight champion back in 2014. It was a long road for Esparza to get back to this point. But again, it's hard to feel good, to be fair, with either fighter getting their hand raised. Just a forgettable night in what on paper was expected to be a good one at 115 pounds.
How soon do we see Rose again?
It's going to be interesting. I think that she's going to have a lot to prove after this, so I'm going to say soon. This isn't like her title loss to Jessica Andrade a few years ago, in which she was slammed on her head and knocked out cold and openly talked about retirement afterwards. We've seen Rose completely reform herself from a mental toughness standpoint and from the standpoint of being able to find out how to get the most out of her game. Only this wasn't her best foot forward. It was a little too safe and conservative and nothing demonstrative about it. You learn a lesson this hard and you lose your title in this way, you're going to want to run it back right away. And if they went the route of a trilogy fight here, I mean, I would say you wouldn't hate it because these two have history, but did you hate this rematch just enough? I'm not sure exactly what happens next. We know the division is loaded, but for Rose, you're going to have to come back once again and prove that this was a hiccup, an aberration. It's tough when you take a loss in which you weren't really dominated, but it hurts internally to know that maybe a little bit of self-enforced, error was the cause of this for Rose.
Carla Esparza, the new strawweight champ. BC, break it down for us here on CBS Sports HQ, UFC 274. BC, sit tight. Next month, we've got UFC 275, 2 title fights on the line. The main event features the light heavyweight championship between current champ Glover Teixeira and Yuri Prochazka. Luke Thomas, Brian Campbell just did an interview with Teixeira. Check that out on the award-winning Morning Combat. Also, Valentina Shevchenko looking to defend her flyweight title against Talia Santos. And we got a women's strawweight rematch between Weili Zhang and Joanna Jędrzejczyk, June 11th from Singapore.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.